Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, January 15th. I guess we're about halfway through the month. I don't know. Is this an Ides January? I can't remember. Anyway, January 15th, 2025. Time for another show. Time for another 5 days of, I guess, normalcy while we gear up and wait for the idiots to take over and then tell us that the state prohibits us from calling them idiots on the show anymore. I don't know. Probably likely to happen at some point, by general acclamation, I suppose, or general proclamation, rather. It won't be acclamation, but proclamation, yes. I don't think they'll ever find this place, but you never know. Anyway, big day for, I don't know what, regretting yesterday's events. Pete Hegseth, my email news, my inbox filled with dispatches from the Hill tells me, how did they put it? Hegseth clears, Hegseth clears fiery Senate hearing. Like he cleared the bar, I guess. He survived. Nobody killed him, I guess, at the thing. Or he didn't resign, or drop out, or no Republicans announced that they weren't going to support him, or something like that. I guess that's what it means to clear the Senate hearing. And that's all there is to it. I mean, it was, I don't know. I guess it was what you expected. I didn't watch most of the thing live. I saw a lot of people live tweet/posting it, I guess. And it happened, I believe it did, in fact, kick off during the show. So there was no chance for us to watch it live anyway. Many of you probably watching it with one eye and listening with one ear to the show. And like I said, I think it was pretty much what everybody expected. He went in there and said, I'm not a blackout drunk. Yes, you are. I'm not going to be when I become Secretary of Defense. You should make me the Secretary of Defense, and then I'll stop drinking. That'll be my big incentive. You can save me. And then, it kind of eventually just morphed into, maybe being a big drunk is a good thing. We've never tried that. And we're facing all sorts of new challenges in the world today. Maybe a drunk Secretary of Defense is exactly what we need. So now it's a good thing. I don't know. And there were a couple of interesting moments. Apparently, at some point, Pete Hegseth says something about, I guess, in accepting questions from hostile Democrats. Or maybe he was talking to a Republican when he said it. Hey, I'm an open book, which he's not, and it's a drunk book anyway. But on top of all of that, I think Tim Kaine pointed out, I don't know whether he pointed it out during the hearing or just in interviews after the fact, the reason that we all have to sort of kind of tiptoe around the idea that Pete Hegseth sexually assaulted someone at the Republican Women's Conference in California is that he paid a cash settlement to the woman who accused him in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement, a gag order, essentially, for this woman. So she can't speak out about it in public without getting sued, and she can't speak about it in private because no Republican senators would meet with her. And they won't meet with her. This is the great catch-22. They won't meet with her because she's not coming out in public, and they don't listen to. I don't want to hear from anything anonymous sources who won't go on the record. We know where that leads. But at any rate, that's the feedback loop they were putting her through. And then they were just saying, well, the record doesn't reflect any of this stuff. So we support him. He says, I'm an open book. Tim Kaine says open books don't have NDAs. That's actually a pretty good point, right? So there are people who are not allowed to talk about their direct experience with me that bears directly on my fitness for this or any other job, or indeed being out on the street versus being incarcerated. But I'm an open book otherwise. And by the way, most of my book documents me drinking quite a bit. But don't talk to any of those people either. All right. Well, it was quite a day. And of course, we also had the Jack Smith report to take a look at. I'm pondering whether or not the Smith report is the kind of document that requires, as some of his previous work has done, a thorough reading and actually reading all the way through cover to cover. But on the other hand, most of the information in there, as we said, is not actually new. It's just being put in different format, and I guess maybe presented differently. It might hit differently. There's certainly people who are mining it for interesting nuggets, but I don't know. I might be too sad to spend your time on it, because all it'll do is document all of these things for which he should be facing criminal liability right now, but instead will face none. So, it's another round of stories quite like that, I guess, today. That also on tap, and people absorbing the fact that he won't actually face any consequences for this. And the parade of moneyed interests who are just coming to visit him. And it's just the worst possible situation for somebody who would really wish that Donald Trump wouldn't be living in seventh heaven, ensconced at Pervalago, and the richest people that he has ever heard of anyway, because he's seen them in a magazine or on television, are parading through and just giving him $1 million and leaving. There was something I picked up today via, I don't know, was it in my email? Was that it? Or somebody posting about it on Blue Sky, linking to the Axios AM newsletter, I guess, which is not something I usually check in with. And it's Mike Allen, and nobody really wants to check in with him. But he did put forward one of these things right up at the top, the first picture, and everyone knows the eyes go to the pictures. It's true. And Donald Trump loves reading things with pictures. Their first item here, one big thing, I guess that's the first thing at the top of the newsletter each day, Trump's $500 million windfall. And, just quickly pointing out that people are just lining up to give away $1 million to him through the inauguration fund and some other vehicles as well. Noting here, the crypto guys are just blowing it out, is the quote here. One Trump advisor said. It used to be that $1 million was a big number. Now we're looking at some folks giving like $10 million or $20 million. Of course, why it matters. Well, yeah, $500 million is what they're thinking they may raise by this summer, which is a huge amount, as they say, for someone who can't, quote unquote, I would say, can't run again, and a signal that Trump is ready to, you guess, use that money to help allies. That's kind of dumb. Punish opponents, sure, and spend big to keep Republicans in full control of Congress through his term. He actually plans to spend Elon Musk's money on that. And then, of course, the money is just pouring in at Mar-a-Lago, a Trump advisor told us. Trump doesn't have to lift a finger. He can't. Everyone's coming to him. And that's really interesting. And donors run the gamut: tech, healthcare, agriculture, insurance, finance, et cetera, and this is sort of the interesting part here, I guess, the between the lines part. I guess this is where they're supposed to add interest to this. Trump has made it clear in meetings with corporate donors that this is a one-way street. They donate money to support his agenda, but he's not taking their money to support their agenda, which is the usual kind of corruption we worry about. What's really interesting is that people are writing these checks knowing that he's just going to say, thanks, and walk away. And if they do or say anything that disturbs him, he'll stab them in the back with no hesitation. A lot of these guys are going down to Mar-a-Lago taking victory laps because he's taking their money, and they're in for a rude awakening. A corporate consultant familiar with the process said, sure, he'll throw an inaugural party with their money, but he owes them nothing. So even so, donors seem to be giving on the assumption that there's something in it for them. And there may be, yet there is a point here, the last thing and last item in this entry. We don't want to get doged, one lobbyist told Axios. And that's really all it is you think that there's something in it for you. What there is in it for you is that they won't put you on the death list right out of the box. It's not that you can't get there. It's not that you may not end up there for something you don't even know about or understand, or that wasn't an AI-generated hoax, but that's really about it. They're hoping to buy, I guess, a month's worth of protection with their millions of dollars, And it's, well, what can I tell you? I'm hopeful anyway that the only thing I can take out of it that's hopeful is newspapers and media tend to like to do exposés on following the money. And there's a lot of money to follow. So maybe they'll do it. The only problem is that some of the people giving him $1 million are the newspaper guys. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. Greg Dworkin is here. He hasn't given us $1 million or anything, but we're gonna talk to him anyway. Even though, really, I guess that's the thing I should be doing. So start work on it. Start collecting that money, Greg. Good morning.
Good morning. I bet $1 million of David's money that the LA Times won't cover it.
Okay. Well, that's I don't know. That might actually. Can you parlay that into something on FanDuels or something like that?
I don't know. I'm not on Wall Street. I don't know how those things work.
Something crypto. There. I finally found the $1 million I needed.
So, the whole thing is I don't think the business people truly, because they're not New Yorkers, obviously. If they were, they would understand Trump's business model is basically, nice business you got here. Yeah. Be ashamed if something happened to it.
Yeah. Yep.
And they didn't see Godfather Part 2.
How can it be? Who are these adults that have not seen it?
My offer is nothing.
Yeah.
And I'd appreciate it if you'd pay the gaming fee.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why? You're not allowed to have a gaming license. Oh, right. Well, anyway, pay this other. I have another guy who owns the license.
I mean, that's all it is.
Yes.
And so
yes.
Why they don't recognize that, I can't tell you. They're obviously afraid.
Yes. That's basically it. Just as all of the Republicans who flirted with the idea of maybe Pete Hegseth is too drunk to be.
They're gonna.
No, they've changed their mind. Joni Ernst.
Who among us hasn't,
I don't know,
done something in their previous life that they should be, sorry about? Said the Republican head of that particular committee.
Yeah, well,
whoever's name it is, who cares?
It doesn't make a difference. Plug in anybody you want. But yeah, I don't know who among us has, but. If that person is nominated for Secretary of Defense, we should ask about it.
By the way, I sent you a funny picture from the committee. It was the only funny thing that happened. They had all these people, Republicans, saying, we need a man like Pete Hegseth because there's too much DEI in our miltary. They put up a sign spelling military, M-I-L-T-A-R-Y. Miltary. Because we're so competent, we got to have a guy like Hegseth, And, the thing to me that just seems so obvious is that he is so obviously unqualified that all it does is expose how corrupt the whole system is. Well,
yes, but we're all sitting here watching it work anyway. Maybe the second eye
it's going to work. There's no question he's going to be nominated.
Military.
The Republicans have bought it hook, line, and sinker, just like the corporate people have. We know that. That's the depressing part. That's why it's going to be really depressing for about 4 or 5 months until they start screwing up and shooting themselves in the foot.
Oh, they could actually do that. They have the technology.
They've
paid for it.
Yeah, and besides, as you have documented over the years, things like that happen all the time.
Yes, there's great widespread private interest in shooting themselves in the feet as well.
Widespread private interest in shooting themselves in the privates,
which also happens. Too. And widespread public interest in the people who shoot themselves in the privates. That is a headline that will always sell.
Yeah, headless man killed in topless bar. That kind of thing. But, these things happen.
Yes.
It's just so obvious to me that Hegseth is terrible. And yet, I give you Politico.
Oh, all right. Does anyone want to buy a Politico?
As an exhibit.
Oh, all right.
And Jonathan Martin takes this tack on it, which is, before I even read it to you, I just have to emphasize the whole point here is that only Democrats are adults, only Democrats have agency.
Right.
Republicans are not responsible for anything that happens ever. And so the headline is, by targeting Hegseth, Democrats open a path for Gabbard. European insiders view Trump's nominee for intelligence director as far more vulnerable than his choice for Pentagon chief. That's because she's not a white, Christian supremacist male.
Why not?
Why, she's more vulnerable. Now, this was...
What's wrong with her?
Martin's whole point is, look at all the attention on Hegseth. Nobody's paying attention to Gabbard. Therefore, it's good for him. This was a hearing about... Wait for it.
Who? What? Where?
Pete Hegseth.
Well, why didn't they say Tulsi
the Democrat
Gabbard?
Didn't spend all their time talking about Gabbard.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, Rubio is up, today?
I believe he is. They're all up now, all of a sudden.
And that's, just like a waste of time, a formality. He's a senator.
Yeah.
The senator is going to give this slot to a senator. It's not even an issue. It wouldn't matter if he had Hegseth's record. He's a senator. He's going to get it. Whole systems. But what's that got to do with Gabbard? Nothing.
What?
Absolutely.
Nobody said Gabbard? Yeah. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. It's just, I guess that's one of those.
This November, they focused in the press on Hegseth because the press has focused on Hegseth. And therefore, because the press has focused on Hegseth, it's obviously Democrats' fault because we all know they do everything wrong.
Yeah.
And if they only did it perfectly, this wouldn't happen. And none of what I just said is true. None of it. But that's what the article is.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like an AI written sort of a thing. It probably wasn't. I mean, I'm sure he wrote
Jonathan
it.
Martin,
but yeah, essentially, like there are some days where I do feel like it's more obvious when they're like, I don't know. I mean, my contract says I have to put something on paper here today. So I guess this is politically sounding. Yeah. All right. This is standard political AI. Like really, an AI machine could have said that. Well, it's going to be critical of Democrats. Talk about another nominee that everybody has forgotten about. But it's the easiest formula in the world.
John McCain.
Yeah, possibly.
It's the same stuff. It's the same attitude. It's the same idiocy.
It's the most falling off a log thing you can do is everybody's ignoring this other thing story.
Right. And so my point here is when it's all rigged, it doesn't really matter.
Oh.
And so the whole idea that what Democrats did or didn't do, when you're in the minority, it makes no difference.
That is largely true of everything.
Of everything in Washington. That's how it works.
Yeah. Well, they should undo that. But
sure, Democrats did all the right things with Hegseth. They pointed out that Miltary was spelled wrong. They pointed out that he broke every commitment he ever made to any of his wives. Why should we believe him now?
Mm-hmm. Right.
When they asked him about his blackout drinking, he said, "These are all lies. They're trying to smear me. I don't acknowledge any of this. Oh, by the way, I promised not to do it anymore."
Right. Just I didn't do anything, but I paid somebody.
If you promised not to do it anymore, doesn't that mean you did it? No. Oh, they're all lies. I'm an open book. Like you said. What about all of the NDA, non-disclosure agreements? What about them?
I don't know.
Says, well,
this book smells like gin.
Talk about anything you wish, and the military is too woke, and I'm an expert, and we need boots on the ground because we've never had a Secretary of Defense with boots on the ground. And just look at every Republican defense secretary that a Democrat appointed. They're pretty much all boots on the ground.
Yeah. Well,
some of them with shrapnel.
The point is that none of them were boots on the ground that didn't know what they were doing and were drunk.
Yeah, with boots on the wrong feet.
Right. I'm drinking out of my boot, an old rugby tradition, unfortunately.
So I think it was Tammy Duckworth who said, so what about that? What can you tell us about the South China Sea and the area of the world where we're most in conflict with China, since you seem to be making a big deal? Name the countries who are in that alliance. And he named several countries, none of which were in that alliance.
Yes,
that's the kind of thing that's completely disqualifying, like in normal circumstances. And these are obviously not normal circumstances, which is why Democrats find it so frustrating. And not only does he, obviously paint a picture of Republicans going along with anything and not being in the least bit critical, but then the press comes along and says, see, it's Democrats' fault for the way they conducted the hearing.
Oh. How? Yeah. Well, by the way, what would even be the criticism?
Hegseth looked like the grown-up in the room because he was cool, calm, and collected, and Democrats are really upset about him being there. Therefore, Hegseth won. Because you're the press, and you can't be more superficial.
Right. It was a smug a-hole contest, and guess who lost? All right. The people who were upset about the guy being nominated for the job who's unqualified, drunk, and smug, and an a-hole about it?
Look, there's even specific examples. I mean, you could look to, for example, Chris Cillizza's comments.
Why would you all right.
Why would you do that? Because, he makes it so public that you can't even get around it. Sam Stein pointed out that Hegseth didn't commit to following the Geneva Convention. And
right.
Cillizza says,
that's a good idea,
people,
actually.
I've been on a faith journey over the last year, and I'm struck by Pete Hegseth in response to Democrats raising his infidelity, responding, I failed in things in my life, and thankfully I've redeemed by my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I have thoughts, said Cillizza. My first reaction was cynical, but except what if it's true? What if Hegseth really did find God and it changed how he views himself? We can't assume anything. Read my newsletter. I have more. And I read this and said, what? I understand why Cillizza was fired. I understand he's terrible. But what?
Where did you find word of Chris Cillizza writing something?
Oh, on the other place. So
okay, I was just wondering. I mean, well, that's the garbage you're subjected to. It's your choice. All right, but so there's some filter. But that's a legitimate question to ask now. I understand that it was a terrible thing that happened to you. You came across a Chris Cillizza piece. How did you do that? And is there a way for you to stop?
But you have to look at X if you want to see what's going on in the rest of the world. You just do.
You do.
And I wind up looking at both of them. Thank goodness Blue Sky now embeds on Daily Kos so I can go to it first.
Isn't that great?
But there's stuff that isn't there from the rest of the world.
Well, Cillizza.
There's even stuff that's not there from the U.S.
It's true. There are different things. This is not about who's using it and who isn't. I'm very pleased that you have to know and where to go and kind of sort of go out of your way to run into Cillizza. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry he's there.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that's terrific. I don't
watch CNN either. So that's where it used to be. And I don't watch that.
Yeah. Well, they took that away from him.
Well, Cillizza says, if we're being honest, none of us can look into Pete Hegseth's soul. That's bullshit. I know exactly what's in his soul. Come on. His soul is black.
You can look in. You just can't see anything. There's no light being reflected out. There's no way we can know what's in there. And doesn't matter, and it's never actually been an issue before for anything, and it won't be now. We can't look into someone's soul. I know.
I caught myself, says Cillizza,
he's drunk.
Instantly judging him as using his faith as a crutch, and maybe he is. But maybe he means it. I mean, this is the kind of thing that Republican senators tell themselves.
I guess so.
And that's one of the reasons why I want to highlight it, not because Cillizza is any kind of oracle, but how do normal people justify voting for somebody like Hegseth? This is how.
I guess so.
You talk yourself into thinking, what if, there's a 1% chance that he means it? Shouldn't I go with that? Because my judgment and balance is just so good. That's why I'm a senator.
It doesn't even for senators, I guess that's the ultimate outcome of it. For Cillizza, it's not even that valuable a tool. Like what he's doing, what analysis is. Maybe he's telling the truth. On the other hand, maybe he's not. Thank you. That has been my analysis. You're a reporter.
Why don't you go find out?
Well, he's not going to be able to do that. No one can look into his soul. Some say there was too much peanut butter on the sandwich. Others, too much jelly. And there you have it. Thank you for subscribing to my newsletter. Tomorrow there may be one. There may not be one. I may overcharge your account. I might not. I don't know why anybody would subscribe to that, but okay. That's literally all he's done here.
Where in either the Department of Justice regulations or the Constitution, for that matter,
show me.
Does it say that if I say God forgives me or I ask God for forgiveness, that all my charges are dropped? That anything I ever did doesn't matter anymore? Oh. Where does it say that? It's not there, but it is in the mind and the new Constitution that they want to do for the Christian nationalists who are running this place. Oh. I mean, that's why it's so distressing, important, worth commenting on and discussing.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about it. It might be that he has turned over a new leaf. Of course, the other issue is,
how do we know that?
We
because
have to say
human
that.
Beings with eyes and ears.
Yes, but one of the other big problems is supposing, for the sake of argument, because we love argument, that he has turned over a new leaf. I would say, all right, what's on that? What is he, what's the experience with that leaf? Now what can he do? Nothing.
Where's the leaf?
I mean, lots of people.
And by the way, is this a contingent leaf? I mean, if you take a drink while you're in office,
he did promise.
What is this?
Yeah, and I think somebody confronted him on that too. Like, will you resign? You've said I'll stop drinking if I become Secretary of Defense. So, like, if at some point we find out you're still drinking, does that mean, are you saying, well, if you catch me, I'll resign, or is it just you just saying this now because that's the sort of thing you think will get you past this hearing? Will help you clear this fiery hearing.
Right.
No.
So what I had a picture of Pete Hegseth at the top of the pundit roundup. The headline, by the way, is an unqualified defense secretary is on the verge of confirmation. It's an unqualified disaster. But the blurb I put with the picture says, a vastly unqualified Pete Hegseth makes a mockery of the confirmation process thanks to Senate Republicans. The fault is far more in them than Hegseth. He is who he is. They seem willing to look the other way. I wrote an anti-Jonathan Martin blurb, I guess.
I guess you did.
It's the Republicans' fault, and they're the one. I'm not so upset about Hegseth. He is who he is. It's the Senate Republicans who absolutely positively know better, who are cowed into being, I don't know what you call it, but it's not a very nice word or phrase.
Right. Well, now you have the freedom to say those words in public, just not on this show. Thank you very much. You're right. I mean, the bigger problem is the Republican senators. Is other people kind of making the same point, put it in a slightly different way of like, you're handing over the world's most powerful, the world's most lethal military to the hands of a blackout drunk because you're afraid you might get primaried. Like, this is actually one of the prime functions of your job is to stand for election and defend yourself.
I'd rather not. That's why you have 6-year terms.
Yeah. Chickens.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin and I are still here. Both of us dressed for defense, I guess.
We're dressed for being at home and doing a podcast where there's no video.
Right, but take my word for it, because why not? And also, all of you who know different are sworn to secrecy by an NDA. We're dressed for defense. This is by the way, the headline of a New York Times piece, much circulated yesterday. Granted, a style critic's piece, but he wrote a whole thing about how Natalie dressed Pete Hegseth was. The Dapper Nazi is back, and they're big into it. And like I said, granted, it was a style critics thing, but you might wonder, and these days when everybody's watching every penny, why is there a style critic at the New York Times, and why did you send him to Capitol Hill to cover this hearing when he could have maybe gone to, I don't know, a fashion show or something like that? He told us about that. And Pete Hegseth's big fashion statement is that he was going to Washington, D.C. to tell everybody what a huge patriot he was, so he would wear red, white, and blue. How shocking.
I guess Jeff Van Drew is his fashion consultant.
That could be it. He had a American flag themed pocket square, which I thought was interesting. For those who understand the pocket square to have evolved from the handkerchief, the idea of blowing your nose in the flag is now patriotic because stinky guy who doesn't wash his hair and is always drunk says so. Well,
so one of the pieces I wanted to cover today was from Ben Wittes, who's writing at Lawfare.
Don't get it wrong. Yeah.
And he starts with the cult of unqualified authenticity, talking about this hearing that we all saw.
Boom. That's his
And he
phrase.
says, I'll come to these latter qualifications momentarily, but let's pause a moment over the larger proposition, because it seems to me an essential one to understand this current political moment.
All right,
you can
Benjamin.
see it in so many of the central tenets of Trump's approach to governance, the contempt for expertise and traditional qualifications. The insistence that the only real qualification is authenticity, and that authenticity is somehow wrapped up in performative masculinity. The belief that sounding tough and being tough are the same thing, and the conviction that complexity reduces to weakness. It's all right there.
Shut up, wimp.
In the nomination of Pete Hegseth, who frames his lack of qualifications as qualification.
Oh.
It's a different, more authentic variety. He reflects what he calls a warrior ethos. And this idea has the apparently silent assent of all the Republican members of the committee, and a few, at least, enthusiastic takers. It's that Republican committee, I think, that is our problem.
Yes.
Enthusiasms.
They do have that for him. Yeah, well, that's authenticity.
Right? For example, Mark Wayne Mullins said at today's hearing
That's his
that
first
there's
name.
a lot of talk going on about qualifications. Let me read to you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is.
God. Yeah.
Because, in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense is filled by a civilian, and that's it.
That's great. Thanks for what a wonderful example.
Thank you, Mark Wayne Mullins. I'm so glad we elected you.
Well,
and
that's a good thing it wasn't
writes
long.
Ben
He
Witte,
wouldn't have
is
been
the
able to read it.
philosophical core of the Trump era, right there.
Mm-hmm. It just has to be a human being who's an American
You got to
citizen.
look like you need the part. You have to look the part. You know,
Smell the part.
Like Chris Dodd would have been his Democratic candidate for president because Chris Dodd had presidential hair the year he ran.
Right, except that would be declared not presidential hair because a Democrat has it, and they'd run Rick Scott. Sure, but hair means nothing all of a sudden. Well, all right, so thanks for reminding us that any idiot can be confirmed if enough stupid Republicans are willing to vote for him. Mark
He can be
Wayne.
Speaker of the House, the way I read it.
Oh, yeah, right. That's true, too. But no, he's chosen this job instead, and it's not an important one or anything. So,
right.
There you go.
And
Terrific.
so, yeah, you mentioned the special counsel report, and
Yeah,
Joyce
there was
Vance
that
basically summed it up for me yesterday. The most frustrating thing about Smith's report this is from Blue Sky, is that facts were known. Trump planned in advance to use false claims of vote fraud to challenge a loss. His words incited January 6 violence. He supported rioters, that's all in the report, calling them things like patriots, and Americans nonetheless reelected him.
Okay.
Because the price of eggs or something.
Yes.
But of course, because of
eggs,
his tariffs, the price of gas is going to shoot up. So let's see what happens there. Mm-hmm. This is the FAFO part of your who did you vote for?
I don't know, but then I guess I'll be curious to see why high gas prices are good, actually. And I'd love to see their excuse for it.
Right. Now, this is from the New Yorker, Jane Mayer.
Yes.
The pressure campaign to get Pete Hegseth confirmed as defense secretary.
It sucks.
Supporters of Donald Trump's nominee have intimidated potential witnesses, suppressed the FBI background check of the former Fox News host in the run-up in a Senate hearing. So even before it started, it was as rigged as Brett Kavanaugh's review of witnesses by the FBI. That is to say, Trump picks the witnesses.
Yeah. None of them said anything damaging. I don't know why that is, but they didn't. And here's a report that says so. And Republicans wave it and say, I've read the report. There's nothing in it. Right. And that's it. That's all it takes.
So the Trump team's efforts to crush dissent range from public media campaigns targeting vulnerable senators in conservative states and paid for by unelected billionaires to more underhanded tactics. More underhanded than that, I would point out.
Oh.
I would underline underhanded, more underhanded.
I understand.
Tactics aimed at intimidating and discrediting potentially hostile witnesses. Hegseth's lawyer, Tim Parlator, for instance, you remember that name from various and sundry Donald Trump defenses.
Yes.
Has threatened to sue Jane Doe, Hegseth's anonymous rape accuser, and her lawyer for defamation if her allegations prevent her from being confirmed. So far, it appears those tactics may be working. Several potential witnesses, including the accuser, have declined to speak out publicly and have elected not to testify at Tuesday's hearing. And then Republican senators have disparaged anonymous critics, Joni Ernst, for example, who has turned down offers to hear privately from Hegseth's accuser. I mean, a bunch of hypocrites.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Susan Collins declined an offer to meet with the victim.
I'm very concerned.
I mean, they don't want to hear it. They literally have their fingers in their ears.
Yeah, I mean, if I meet with you, people will report that I heard your story, and
I don't want that.
Yeah, then I'll have to be asked why I'm ignoring your story. Where if I
the
don't
amount
hear
of private money, I said corrupt, I meant it. The amount of private money being spent on the effort to confirm Hegseth is staggering for a cabinet nominee. The sum is rivaled only by the cash that's been spent to pressure senators into confirming Supreme Court justices. That'll give you an idea of the scale we're talking about here.
Yes, and the cash given directly to those justices as well.
Right, exactly. In December, a dark money group previously backed by Elon Musk, Building America's Future, also began pouring money into the fight. It spent $500,000 in ads pressuring Ernst to support Hegseth after she voiced doubts. Musk and other Trump allies have made clear they will fund primary challenges against Republican senators who oppose Trump's nominees. According to Fox News, several of Trump's top campaign operatives are set to become senior advisors to the dark money group, which they plan to use as a private funder of Trump's second-term agenda.
Yes.
So basically, they put in the pollster and the campaign manager there.
Yeah, and Luca Brasi.
Well, yeah, and the point being, we're like at least smart enough. We may be stupid people, but we're smart enough to pick out who is the politically vulnerable that we can put pressure on.
Yes, and when it's the Senate, you can afford. When it's the Senate you're talking about, and there's 53 of them, and not all of them running for re-election anytime soon. And you have Elon Musk's pile of money that he, I guess, continues to give Trump permission to leverage. You can just say, I'll put $10 million into a primary against any of you who don't vote for the blackout drunk. If you need to get blackout drunk to do it, go ahead. That's your business. But
Then reporters have been targets for Hegseth's defenders, too.
Oh, good.
So Jonathan Martin, are you in that group?
Yes.
Arthur Schwartz, an advisor to Hegseth, who reportedly has close ties to Don Jr., sent me a link to the Free Beacon story about one of the accusers with a text message saying, "You're such a ridiculous buffoon."
Yeah, good answer.
The insults and intimidation, however, have failed to staunch a growing flood of negative stories on Hegseth, including several from conservative outlets. But in the end, doesn't make any difference.
This is the LOL YOLO Nothing Matters portion of the show.
Right. Which is going to be true for the next 6 months. I mean, you get that 100-day thing.
It's certainly, it's the case for the question of whether or not Republican senators will exercise judgment.
Down and depressed about the first 100 days. It happens in every presidential candidate that you get stuff.
Yeah,
and you
that's
get
the reason.
Treated as if you're legitimate for 100 days. On day 101, it tends to change. Well, we'll see what happens here.
It does. That's the usual way of course, one, they're counting on that for Trump. That's how they normalize him. But two, it's usually the case that you get that 100-day-ish honeymoon or whatever, because we're not sure who you are. But this guy was president before. People don't get 100 days in their second term usually.
Yeah.
But, whatever.
And when they did, we didn't have social media.
Right.
Anyway, so that's what's going on in Washington.
Yeah.
Not much
Why is that going on?
As I said, I think Rubio's this today. I'm not even paying attention. Doesn't matter. He'll be confirmed.
It's a
I am curious
thing,
when Gabbard's
okay.
hearing is. I think that'll be interesting.
Yes. Well, the reason you don't know it is because you were distracted. Yeah.
Remember, she was the trio, along with Matt Gaetz, who actually did withdraw.
Yes.
Pam Bondi will be, getting a hearing. It doesn't matter. She'll be confirmed. I mean, most of them will. I think Gabbard is the one left that you really have to keep an eye on.
But if you do that, you'll be ignoring Hegseth.
So nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Except that everybody knows what's going to happen.
I guess the only thing we have that's left to figure out is, so who will run the Pentagon then? Yeah. I mean, Hegseth is going to be confirmed, but the question of who will run the Pentagon is another question entirely.
Right. So welcome back to chaos. Now, we should at least mention that the Southern California wildfire is still going on. Still dangerous.
True. Why don't we put him in charge of putting the fires out, the drunk guy?
Interestingly,
while he's waiting,
the one person who is probably going to lose their job over this is Karen Bast, the mayor of L.A.
All right. All right.
Because she did a Ted Cruz.
She was away.
About that stuff, except if you live in Texas. The blood is in the water for Karen Bass, writes Peter Hamby, who's a pretty, straightforward, center-of-the-road correspondent.
Okay.
The feckless Los Angeles mayor is certain to lose her seat if she isn't recalled first. If it's true she left the country on a Saturday after the warning came out that these fires were possibly coming, it's a dereliction of duty. Ari Emanuel, who donated to Bass's campaign, told me, the reporter Peter Hamby.
Oh, well, he donated, so you have to listen to him.
Right. Over 30 years ago, he writes, before the incineration of Altadena and the Pacific Palisades, before Elon Musk ran Wild and X, before Karen Bass and Rick Caruso were in politics, before climate change became the left's doomsday explanation for everything.
Oh, come on.
As if there was an agency from people. This is what he's getting at, so give him a break until I finish.
Okay.
The chaparral-flecked mountains of Southern California burned. From Malibu to Eden Canyon, down Laguna Beach, the hot Santa Ana winds fueled wildfires that scorched tens of thousands of acres, razed hundreds of homes. The year was 1993. Celebrities fled their burning mansions down narrow canyon roads, running alongside average middle-class homeowners. Places had become a precious source of generational wealth, thanks to the region's soaring property values.
It shouldn't be. I was a huge disaster. Ha ha ha. No, but the real tragedy is that rich people had to run next to hoi polloi.
Right, exactly.
I see.
Looters prowled the abandoned neighborhoods. Republicans blamed vagrants for arson. And indeed, arson was found to be the cause of some of the fires. City and county agencies bickered with each other in the aftermath. In Laguna, angry victims and greedy developers presaged today's DEI finger-pointing, blaming a gay city council member for devoting too much attention to AIDS and not enough on fire protection. Eager to rebuild and reclaim their stunning hillside views of the Pacific, wealthy liberals begged Democratic leaders to neuter the California Coastal Commission and its environmental protections. I'm cribbing these stories from Ecology of Fear, Mike Davis's seminal book about L.A. and the imagination of disaster, which was available. Because of its unrivaled beauty, people in Southern California choose to live on the edge of disaster alongside the ocean and the mountains, building homes in places that human beings might not be meant to live. But they build anyway, collecting memories as they live, raising their families despite the ambient risk of flames and mudslides and floods and quakes. And we should add ash slides. Then, when disaster strikes, municipal debates that might seem tedious elsewhere about water, insurance, zoning, brush mitigation, we talked about all of that on the show, explode into vicious and intensely personal political battles. As Davis writes in a different book, City of Quartz, Los Angeles homeowners love their children, but they love their property values more. That's what he's getting at when he said, the left is honing in on climate change. And yes, it's true, and that's what's driving it. But at the same time, humans make it worse in every possible way.
Certainly.
Another quote grabbed me over the weekend as I thought about the current state of L.A. politics in the wake of the fires and the dismal response from the city's Democratic mayor, Karen Bass, whose political career is lying somewhere amid the ash. Davis quotes an anonymous screenwriter who moved to the Santa Monica Mountains in the 80s. And Santa Monica is just so beautiful.
All right.
I was extraordinarily liberal till I came to Malibu, the writer said. Now I'm a fascist.
Why?
Indeed, the absolute worst place for a politician to stand in California is between an Angelino and their extremely valuable property.
Yes, I guess so.
People in L.A. are, for the most part, focused on helping their friends and loved ones who lost everything. Doesn't make it sound like a really pleasant place to live, except it's just drop dead gorgeous. But
right.
They're also focused on helping strangers. But that sort of fellowship and generosity, unusual for such a sprawling, diverse city, which remains remarkably stratified by class and race, is what most people in LA are focused on. But there's the obnoxious and inescapable background noise of social media with partisans and clout chasers rushing to X and TikTok. And boy, are the clout chasers upset that TikTok is on the line there. And elsewhere, to post about why the fires are the logical outcome in the failed dystopia of liberal California, even the incoming president couldn't resist posting about Gavin Newsom.
Oh, come on now. Of course he couldn't.
And California's supposedly incompetent leadership. Musk tried to point it out in his own icky way, trying to bait local firefighters They told us they did, in fact, have enough water. It's just that the blaze was so massive, the water system couldn't sustain the flow. An inconvenient truth for Musk, who, like other MAGA screen addicts last week, couldn't resist posting about politics. But at the same time, Bass, elected mayor just over 2 years ago, has emerged as the singular public figure that even liberal Los Angeles is done with. It's not because she may or may not have cut the fire department budget or left a reservoir empty or didn't do enough to clean up brush and vegetation.
Didn't do any of these things.
Right? People understand there are no easy solutions and it'll take time to learn all the facts. The bigger issue and the main issue is that Bass lost the public trust in spectacular fashion. The National Weather Service warned of dangerous fire conditions. Bass knew about it because we all did. If you live in L.A., you got the weather alert and your news are on your phone. The mayor's office certainly knew about it. And despite that, she boarded a plane and left for Ghana. I mean, it's the Ted Cruz thing. You can't do that. You absolutely, positively cannot do that as a politician.
Unless you do, and then
she's not going to get away with it.
No, I
Nobody
will just point
is
out
standing
that
up for Bass these days.
Ted Cruz did.
Yeah, but people stood up for it because it's Republicans. Nobody's standing up for Bass.
Well, no, that's
Kristen Crowley, her own fire chief, has thrown Bass under the bus in numerous media appearances. The city's controller sided with Crowley, pointing a lengthy social media review of Bass's budget cuts. And Newsom says local officials needed to provide better answers about the response. So, again, firefighters are saying they had enough water.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the guys who's running for mayor, Rick Caruso, the Democrat/Republican/rich guy, protected his gleaming Palisades Mall with the help of private firefighters. The truth is still murky, but with Bass doing little to rally the city, frustrated Angelinos are open to whatever Caruso is saying. So I'm just telling you that Peter Hamby and others are telling us that Karen Bass is in trouble.
Okay. I can see that that's the case. I don't know whether it's warranted or not. But
can't tell you that. Don't live there.
Is Pacific Palisades, is that actually in Karen Bass's jurisdiction?
I'm not LA clear County and LA City are different, of course.
Yeah, that's the issue. Is most of what burned appears to me to be outside of her jurisdiction. All of Los
Angeles.
I mean, okay. I mean, isn't there a mayor of some other city that we hate that we can blame too? They're on the same continent. Why didn't that guy do anything? I don't know. Well, yeah. What can I tell you?
Pacific Palisades, according to Wikipedia, is a neighborhood in the west side region of Los Angeles.
Okay. I'm just curious because I really don't know.
It's only 20 miles west of downtown LA.
That's a pretty big jurisdiction.
So,
and also, of course, it's
large. It's a neighborhood in LA, California, according to Wikipedia. Do I know? No, I don't know.
Yeah. Los Angeles County,
Santa
I believe,
Monica,
is the
city.
The
it's part of LA
biggest
County for
state.
Sure. LA City, I don't know. It's kind of far.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. I don't know.
Glendale, Pasadena, these are all separate.
Yeah.
And Pacific Palisades is even further away from downtown LA than Glendale and Pasadena.
But it counts as that. It probably has something to do with the property value thing there too. Like if I can't say it's LA, then the value is less, even though everybody wants to be on this mountain and everything. But I need to sell an LA zip code somehow as part of it because the LA people want to live in these mountains and they don't want to move out of LA. And we have the similar games here. You know, what is and isn't DC or the DC side of some commuter town. Interesting. But okay, well, I don't know. Sounds bad and quite annoying, of course. Oh my gosh, she's done the Ted Cruz thing. What, you mean survived and been reelected? No, I mean being drummed out of office for traveling abroad at a critical moment. Right, well, Ted Cruz did that and was fine. Yeah, well, it's okay if you're a Republican. There you go. Because that's
now, ballots cast in the 5 voting precincts that largely constitute the Palisades overwhelmingly went to Kamala Harris.
Yes.
71% for Harris. Trump got 27%, so it's largely liberal-leaning, but that means, of course, there's about 30% Republicans there.
I guess they set the fires.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. But,
that's what I heard.
All politics is local.
Right. And I don't know what that means. And I guess now they'll all say, Donald Trump will pay for rebuilding my house. That's what he said, so I'm for him. All right. Well, Good luck with that one. I don't know. Karen Bass, I don't know. It's just quite annoying, to say the least. And amazing the way things work. Because the guy who originated this play, running away during a disaster, came out just fine. What's the difference?
Right.
He's Canadian.
Here's a different story, same topic. This is from Washington Post. LA Mayor Karen Bass faces political crisis over trip budgets amid fires. I mean, it's a thing. It's not just Peter Hamby saying it. So, something to keep an eye on. And do recalls happen in California? Why, yes, they do.
Okay. I guess so. And I'm informed, I don't know how this is a thing, but Scott tells me that there's a Wikipedia entry for the honorary mayor of Pacific Palisades.
Which is who?
You'll love it. But the honorary mayor of Pacific Palisades is a position created in 1951, not just made up yesterday, unless the Wikipedia entry was made up yesterday, by the Pacific Palisades Chamber of Commerce. The current honorary mayor is 1, Canadian, for one thing, and 2, Canadian actor Eugene Levy, serving somehow, I don't know in what capacity, since January 26, 2021. Why is the fire not his fault? He's Canadian, and I don't know what. I guess that's it. And nobody realized that there was such an office, and it doesn't do anything. And I don't know. There you go. How interesting is that? They have terms and everything, it says. Although it does say that the term is 2 years non-renewable, but that somehow the incumbent is Eugene Levy, who's been in office since January 2021. 2 years from that, of course, would be 2023. And in a non-renewable term, he is renewed anyway. And there you have it.
So this is a 2022 story from the local Patch.
Yeah.
There's a Patch in many different areas of stringers who write reports. LA Mayor's Race 2022 heads to runoff. Pacific Palisades election results. Returns show that Caruso leads Bass by 16,000 votes. In Pacific Palisades.
Okay.
So this makes it sound like they vote for the mayor.
I guess so. They vote for their own honorary mayor. And by the way, it's not unusual. Now I'm looking at the past honorary mayors, and I guess the thing is you elect / appoint a famous person to do it. Like, who's famous and lives here? Well, everybody. And so Eugene Levy is not. It's not like, oh my God, how did he do? It was Billy Crystal and his wife Janice before him.
Right. So
Kevin
again,
Nealon.
I want to point out here that just for the record, Kamala Harris way outperformed Karen Bass in that area.
Okay. Well, we'll see whether that lasts, or everybody gets blamed, or nobody gets blamed, or we blame the honorary mayor. This is some list. You should see it.
And, again, I would step back and say whatever you personally think of Bernie Sanders backers or the Progressive Caucus or things of that sort, I wouldn't be talking tough about how you're going to primary other people when, in fact, your contingent in politics is not doing particularly well at the ballot box these days.
Oh, okay.
So just keep that in mind as you figure out how to work with the rest of the minority who still can't stop anything in Washington.
Okay. Well,
Hakeem Jeffries has a big job, doing it pretty well, keeping his caucus together. Not easy. But California wildfires are at least a big deal to that community, even more probably than traffic in Northern Virginia. I mean, just not something you can ignore.
Well, what is Eugene Levy doing about it?
I don't know.
Nothing.
What did Billy Crystal do about it? Obviously,
it was really Janice's
job. This wouldn't have happened.
Clearly, but he blamed his predecessor.
Liar.
Who was his predecessor? I'll tell you. It was Kevin Nealon.
Yeah, liar.
Well, by the way, it says there's almost no time left anyway. I might as well tell you. Sugar Ray Leonard, at one point, occupying the position. Gavin
I'm not
McLeod.
saying anything bad about Sugar Ray Leonard.
Right, don't.
That guy packs a punch.
Gavin McLeod, that guy steered a mean boat, right? Steve Gutenberg. There's the answer. That's why, if you thought this was like, all of a sudden Steve Gutenberg is active in this neighborhood, no. Honorary mayor of Pacific Palisades, 2002 to 2006, for another one of those 2-year non-renewable terms. What?
Do they have a picture of him?
Well, not as mayor. He doesn't. They give him a sash or something. Anthony Hopkins, who ate the previous mayor, Martin Short. This is crazy, right? Eddie Albert, Bob Saget, John Raitt, Rita Moreno, Chevy Chase.
John Raitt Jr. Really?
Chevy Chase, who fell down the steps during the whole. Everybody, look, yeah, all actors of various.
I know John Raitt
eras.
Jr. when he was lead in the Pajama Game on Broadway, the original Broadway cast. Of course, his daughter Bonnie is somewhat more famous than he was, but he's great.
Well, he did a bad job as mayor, and that's really his fault.
Yeah.
Dom DeLuise, I'm not kidding. Ted Knight, Bert Convey. Walter Matthau was before Bert Convey, which is
it's probably amazing. Pretty grumpy about
also, that. Also, Adam West, better known as Batman, but the job was it's serious. I'm telling you.
I'm just shocked it wasn't Clint Eastwood. Of course,
it may have been, and that could have happened before then, for all I know. But who knew? And the answer is Scott, and then nobody else.
Right.
I guess so.
Anyway, for those of you from California, I apologize. I don't claim to have any local insight into this, having only lived there for a few months and not in Southern California.
Okay. It never rains. That's probably part of the problem.
I had the pleasure of living in Monterey, which is just drop dead gorgeous. I get the attraction of the beauty.
Yes.
But you're really not supposed to have a house on a hillside where when it rains it falls down into the valley. It's just like not a good idea.
Right. Well, that's the reason for it falling down into the valley, isn't it? Or at least if you believe the redemption story. You lost the redemption story. All right. We'll see you on Thursday. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Gosh, there's still an awful lot happening that we haven't covered yet. And I'm just astonished, though, at what I learned from Wikipedia here that Scott sent us the link to. It's always been an actor, so that's clearly the thing. And I gave you, this is a weird collection of actors, I guess. I don't know. It makes sense. They're all going to live in these expensive properties. But let's see, other names that I actually recognize, and some of them I don't, but are almost assuredly very famous actors of their day. And others of you may recognize them and say, kids today, they don't know who, let's say, Virginia Bruce was. Virginia Bruce, in addition to being the very first honorary mayor of Pacific Palisades, is herself an actor, died in 1982, so been gone a while, and active as a long career, of course, from the 1930s into just barely into the 1980s. And I don't know. I guess you could look her up on IMDb if you want to tick off the roles, and maybe there are some that would even be familiar in her later days to someone like me, but I guess that's been the gig. It's always a famous actor. I don't know if there's anybody who wasn't an actor. She was succeeded immediately by Jerry Lewis. Okay, I recognize his name. Then Jack Owens, Vivian Vance, Mel Blanc, Doug McClure, Bob Rockwell, Jerry Paris, Nanette Fabre. I don't even know if I'm mispronouncing anybody's name here. Peter Graves, Bob Abernathy, and Edward Andrews, then Adam West, Walter Matthau, Bert Convey, Ted Knight. You see what's going on here? So then it turns into Battle of the Network All-Stars after that. Okay. I don't know what they do, but clearly the answer is not really anything. Nobody's going to blame them for the fires, and they may have had their houses burned down as well. I don't know how Steve Gutenberg's house made out in all of this after declaring him to be such a fine human being for making the public service announcement as he did. He was a fine public servant who wasn't a public servant at the time, but I don't know. I don't know how his house came out. Okay, other news. Gosh, there's a lot of it, and no telling what our best bet is in terms of order of operations here. But two pieces of international interest, I guess, that I will throw into the mix. One is I add to the news roundup at the risk of it partially normalizing the very weird and dumb Greenland acquisition story. But, that train has left the station anyway. But one, I did see, if I recall correctly, there was an entry on Blue Sky, and I guess I'll have to now go and look for it. But what was it? Political Wire, right? Okay, so I'll go and find Tegan Goddard's Political Wire, and I think the entry noted that the Danish government has expressed an interest in whether or not, here we are, Trump's saber rattling, this is a really unfortunate headline, brings Denmark to the table to talk about Greenland. So just in case you thought that everybody was really just going to ridicule this thing and it was going to go away, nothing may ever happen. And it's not the Danish government coming to the table saying, all right, fine, we'll sell you Greenland. It is, it goes this way. The Wall Street Journal is what's being quoted here in the Political Wire. The Danish government in recent days has privately sent a message to Donald Trump's team that Copenhagen is happy to negotiate military and economic deals related to Greenland, but it wants the conversations to take place behind closed doors, for one thing, and that Denmark isn't looking to spar publicly after the president-elect insisted that the U.S. must own Greenland, which is a Danish territory. Instead, Danish officials said the North Atlantic Treaty Organization member, Denmark, is looking to resolve Trump's self-made crisis quietly, discussing with future U.S. officials how allied militaries could enhance their presence in the Arctic Circle and American companies could gain more access to Greenland's resources. And it may very well be that that's all Trump was ever really looking for, or maybe he thought, if we took it over, I guess that would be great, and I would play that up as a point of American pride. But I would then open it up to American companies for exploitation. But if the Danish will open it up to American exploitation, that might be good enough. So, I don't know. You probably shouldn't have encouraged him, but I guess that's where we are now. The whole thing has been normalized to the point where the Danish government is having to find ways of quietly placating Trump. He does occupy or will occupy the office of the President of the United States, and they have to deal with that, and that's how they're doing it. So there's that. There's also other news from, what's the source here? The LondonEconomic.com. I don't know what that is. Is there anything that will tell me that quickly? Or are they, I'm not certain whether it has, it seems to me like maybe just something that capitalizes on our collective, back in the mind recollection of, there's the London School of Economics. Is that what the London Economic is connected to? No, probably not. It's London. They're entitled to say that. Maybe they're based in London. Maybe they're not. You could just say you're in London. And economics is part of the news. So let's just do that. And then people will think we're very important and reliable. And maybe they are. But I don't know about it. But they were able to report this piece, which I didn't know anything about, so they must know something. Jack Peat is the name, P-E-A-T, as in bog, is credited with the story 40 years after leaving the EU. Did you know that they did that? Greenland wants back in. Well, I wonder if that's related to the saber rattling in the interest of the United States, allegedly. Well, in the person of Donald Trump, anyway, in acquiring it. And they are looking to claw their way back into, I guess, the EU. I did not realize that they had ever been in it, but I guess maybe as a Danish territory they were entitled to EU status, but they were also able to distance themselves from it at some point. But I guess they enjoy some benefits of, being a Danish territory still anyway. Maybe they want to increase those. I don't know. We could read the story, and it is a different direction. By the way, as I was looking around trying to find the Tegan Goddard story, I noted that Darwin just thought it was interesting. Greg and I just having two completely different shows at the same time. Greg about the house is burning down, and me about let's go over this list of honorary mayors, though. And I don't know, that's fascinating. And if I don't deal with it now, I'll never remember to get back to the story about Adam West and Jerry Lewis and Wendy. You don't get a chance to do those sorts of things all the time. All right, so what was happening in Greenland? One, they were once more connected to the EU, but 40 years ago left, which, I don't even know what I would say winding back the clock 40 years on the EU, probably there wasn't a great deal of benefit to Greenland at all at the time, and you could see why they wouldn't necessarily care to be part of it. The EU wasn't all that terribly developed 40 years ago and might not have had anything to offer to Greenland. But now they want back in. And did you even know about this Grexit? Not Greek, Greece's Grexit threats to follow Britain in Brexit, but the Greenlandic ones. And what is this? Is this a re-entry or something? I don't know. What do they want to do? Some 53%, well, not exactly overwhelming, but 53% of Greenlanders voted to leave the European communities in 1982. Now, 60% say that it's time that the world's largest island gets back in. I don't know whether it's about protection or maybe now they're in better position to actually do some economic development, and they'd prefer that the economic development came through the EU versus the United States. I don't know. I guess we can go and find out. 1982 was some 10 years before the real launching point of the integrated market in 1992. That I remember. So, like I said, it was just sort of a more loosely affiliated, trade pact at that point. Although they clearly had in mind this 1992 goal of full or more full economic and political integration. Now, so the London Economic, in the person of Jack Peat, tells us new polling suggests that a majority of Greenlanders would vote to rejoin Europe if the country held a referendum tomorrow. But, of course, this was written on the 14th. And printed. So the question is, are they holding that referendum today, which would have been tomorrow when they wrote this thing? The answer, of course, is no. But if they had, a majority of Greenlanders say they would have voted to rejoin the EU. A survey conducted by Nasifik, who knows what, Nasiffik, the Center for Foreign and Security Policy at, oh my God, Ilsimat. What am I doing? Simatas. I can't even try this. ILISIM. Why am I even spelling it too? It's a university. Is it in Greenland? I guess. Goodness gracious. I'm going to have a hard time with this. I think if I puzzled it out, we would get this Greenlandic name correct eventually. But this university, which has a Center for Foreign and Security Policy, revealed that 60% said that they would vote to re-enter the EU if it went to a ballot. And that was just to get them off the phone because they were tired of trying to pronounce the name of the university. Even they're having trouble with it in Greenland. It comes exactly 40 years after Greenland withdrew from being a part of the European communities, back when we used to call it the EC, not the EU, in 1985. Okay, so they must have voted to do that in 82 and phased it out by 85. 3 years after 53% of the electorate voted out. Rasmus Leander Nielsen, the associate professor at his name was relatively easy to pronounce, the very difficult for me to work out on the air university, has suggested that the result shows people in the country are increasingly warming, to the idea of being back in the EU. Well, it's a very cold place. You can warm, just don't take the glaciers with you. The EU does a lot for the national treasury, supports the school system and green energy, he said, adding that the EU is the second largest contributor to the economy, contributing over 250 million kroner. How much is that? Well, it's 250 million kroner. You dummy, what's wrong with you? Just figure it out in your head. What's more, there are already several economic cooperation agreements in place between the EU and Greenland, with particular focus on fisheries and education, which would be pretty tops, I think, for them. It also comes, of course, after President-elect Donald Trump repeated an idea of acquiring the strategically important and mineral-rich Arctic island, which he said was an, quote, absolute necessity. Responding to the suggestions, Greenland's PM, who is it? Well, suffice to say he's the prime minister there. Maybe Egede, maybe, is the pronunciation of his, what appears to be his surname. Mute, maybe, M-U-T-E, accent mark. It's mute with an accent mark over the U. Mute Borup Egede, maybe. My apologies. I got to work on my Greenlandic, I guess, if we're going to acquire these guys. But don't worry about it. They'll change all the names to Confederate generals, probably. Anyway, the Greenland PM says, and I think quite correctly at this point, Greenland is ours. Yes, we are not for sale and we will never be for sale. We must not lose our long struggle for freedom. But we're going to give you lots and lots of freedom. We have all the best freedoms here in the United States. In fact, terrorists hate us for them. That's how good our freedoms are. Don't you want some of this, Greenland? Don't you want to be the next possible terrorist target? Sure, of course you do. All right, well, anyway, it's interesting because I didn't know that that there was a fraught, maybe, history between, it stands to reason. Greenland is pretty much kind of all the way over here. And I don't know what kind of relationship they have with Europe. I'm getting the idea, certainly because they've been a Danish territory, they are big trading partners, and a lot of their culture and education comes over that way. So they've got to feel some kinship. But then again, that was the case here in the United States, the American colonies too, and then they eventually got annoyed about taxes and broke off the relationship. But Greenland wants back in. Meanwhile, in other places around the globe, you'll be astonished to find out there's more trouble. We haven't checked in on the South Koreans lately, and golly, if they haven't had more trouble. There was something back here from a couple of days ago, maybe a few weeks ago, that I had put aside about the situation and not gotten to. But that, of course, has fallen by the wayside. We are now at a situation in which the South Korean government, outside of the person of its president, is looking to hold its former president. He was impeached, and yet they haven't, this is unusual, we don't understand anything about it, not been able to hold him accountable as of yet. The New York Times has a piece on the subject. South Korea detains its president, but the crisis is far from over. And I realized that we had to go back to the South Korea story as I saw on Blue Sky yesterday a thread from a reporter describing the situation as it was unfolding, and I had to go and take a look around to see if I could grab a United States English language coverage of the story. But William Gallo is the Blue Sky poster here. Voice of America, I guess, employee at the Seoul, Korea Bureau and the regional correspondent. So that's who we would ordinarily be looking to, that sort of person for on-the-ground reportage. South Korean authorities, he began yesterday, are set to make another attempt to detain Yoon Suk-yeol early Wednesday. That is, now early Wednesday happened earlier in Seoul, Korea than it happened here. So what happened? Over 1,000 police officers are expected to participate in the raid. I mean, this is obvious and out there. They're obviously announcing it. A raid on Yoon's home. They're preparing for a standoff that could last up to 3 days, reports Yonhap, which is, I don't know what, is that a news agency? And it looks like it. And the link here is provided, but it also looks to me like it is a Korean language publication. It's not going to help me. Gallo continues on. Yonhap reports that investigators have arrived at Yoon's residence. This is some 19 hours ago that he was posting this stuff. It also reports that some conservative ruling party lawmakers are forming a human chain to prevent the arrest attempt. So this is the sort of information that piqued my interest, certainly, and said maybe we take a look back at what's going on here. There was a live stream, and I don't know whether it's still live, of the situation outside Yoon's residence. And is it his personal residence, or is he still holed up in some sort of... Does South Korea have an official residence for its president? I don't know. As you can see, a large crowd of Yoon supporters are gathered nearby, at least they were at the time, despite the below freezing temperatures and the fact that it isn't even 5 a.m. at the time. Police estimate about 6,500 pro-Yoon protesters are there. And remember, we're talking about a guy who it is now widely recognized in South Korea, if not necessarily outside of South Korea, that he appears to have lost his brain to YouTube, right-wing Korean language YouTube, who have just cast him down into the dark well of conspiracy theory. And it's the same conspiracy theories that our own president-elect tends to believe as well. It's very weird parallel situation. And yet the South Koreans are doing something about removing him from office and possibly holding him accountable legally. As expected, Gallo goes on, the Presidential Security Service is again blocking attempts to detain Yoon. Yonhap reports a standoff has begun outside the presidential residence after investigators and police presented a warrant. Yonhap now reports that investigators are in a physical clash as they attempt to forcibly enter Yoon's residence. Interestingly, multiple Korean outlets report police activity in the mountains behind Yoon's sprawling residential compound. At least one outlet reports that police are trying to enter the compound from back there. It's basically a secluded public hiking trail / kids park that rings the compound. He continues, William Gallo does, to say, I just walked to the kids park hiking trail behind Yoon's compound. I guess you can walk right into this middle of this conflict. I didn't see much unusual activity. Some officers who have been posted in that park for weeks told me and some other reporters to leave. There's also a police bus nearby, but I didn't see anyone trying to enter the compound. Then he posts, I am at another entrance to the mountain park behind Yoon's compound. Definitely a larger than usual police presence here, but it doesn't seem like there's any sense of urgency. Investigators have entered the presidential compound, he then writes, using ladders, reports Yonhap. Appears to be at the main entrance, judging from the live streams. A statement is put out from acting President Choi. It's we got to use our sound effect for that one. Basically the same thing he's been saying for days, which is that the execution of the arrest warrant for the president has commenced. This is a critical moment for maintaining the order and rule of law in the Republic of Korea. The eyes of the entire nation and the international community are closely watching this situation. The National Police Agency and the PSS, is that the Presidential Security Service, are institutions that exist to safeguard the laws and order of our country as well as to ensure the safety of our citizens. Physical confrontations between state agencies can cause irreparable harm to public trust and to the country's standing in the international community, and therefore must not be allowed under any circumstances. We'll see whether it comes to that. All relevant agencies are urged to approach the law enforcement process with prudent judgment and responsible actions. As we have repeatedly emphasized, the prevention of physical clashes, any serious violations leading to unfortunate incidents, will result in strict accountability under my authority as acting president. We'll see what comes of that. Gallo continues on. One more post in this thread, I think, here. Yonhap reports that dozens of police officials entered the presidential compound and are now encountering a third checkpoint area / line of defense, which is quite near Yoon's residence. So they're really having to peel it back in layers like an onion, if you will, even though this is not the reporting of the Onion, though it may seem like that. What does the New York Times have to say about all of this in a style we're more familiar with, even if it's the same paper that for some reason decided to cover the Hegseth hearings as a fashion event. South Korea detains its president, but crisis is far from over. Yoon Suk-yeol became the first South Korean leader to be held by criminal investigators, ending a long standoff after he imposed martial law. This is written and reported from Korea by Cho Sang-hun, I'm doing my best with the names here, Jin Yu-young, and Victoria Kim. Not all that difficult, actually, to put those together. President Yoon Suk-yeol, I'm not sure how the pronunciation is, of South Korea, sounded defiant just over a year ago, when the opposition-dominated National Assembly began threatening to impeach him. I say, try it if you want, he said during a town hall meeting. Those turned out to be poorly chosen words. Mr. Yoon has not only been impeached, but on Wednesday he won an ignominious place in South Korean history when he became the first sitting president to be detained in a criminal investigation. We should look into that. His detention ended a weeks-long political standoff and hand-wringing over what South Korea should do with a leader who declared martial law last month, a move that threatened decades of hard-won democracy in the country. But Seoul's inability to deal with the question quickly, and I mean, come on, it's a hard question, and the fact that it had to mobilize an army of law enforcement forces to make him surrender, exposed how deep the fractures are in its politics. Maybe not so much they may also be very deep, these fractures, like our own, but, like us, they'll also have great difficulty figuring out what to do with a political order designed for, one, people being ashamed to dig in and defy all law enforcement, and two, what do you do with the immovable objects and irresistible forces of the National Police Force versus the Presidential Security Service? I don't know that we have any answers to that, even though we probably should be thinking about it right now, and probably should have been thinking about it before. Anyway, this entrenched political polarization combined with Mr. Yoon's uncompromising style, that is to say, brain rot from YouTube, and his personal animus toward his political enemies, also likewise driven by the same sources and, again, a direct parallel to Donald Trump, led him down a path to the showdown with police on Wednesday at the Hilltop residence where he had retreated. It doesn't sound like it worked out for him. Don't know that it'll go the same way in the United States. Since he won his election by a razor-thin margin in 2022, Mr. Yoon has constantly clashed with the majority opposition over policies, scandals involving his wife, and his hostile relationship with dissidents, including journalists that he accused of spreading, you'll never guess, fake news. His anger exploded on December 3rd when he declared martial law, calling his liberal enemies anti-state forces, and the opposition-dominated National Assembly a monster. The law placed a ban on all political activities and put news media under military control, allegedly. Though the National Assembly killed his martial law decree before Mr. Yoon could enforce such moves. So definitely some value there in moving quickly in opposition. But I don't know that that's something we're going to be able to mirror in this country. Just thought I'd read this to you, though, as a warning. Let's see. We left off here. During the 6 hours of martial law, that is a quick response, he ordered military commanders to break the assembly's door down with axes or by shooting if necessary, and drag out lawmakers, according to prosecutors who have indicted the military generals on charges of helping Mr. Yoon commit insurrection. Somebody should have asked Pete Hegseth whether he would follow the Korean model in this country. He just would have said, I don't know. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. And let's see. We left off in the middle. We're still in the middle of reading about the situation in South Korea. And, we'll continue on. I mean, I think the parallels are more than obvious. So very well worth our time seeing what other countries are doing in dealing with the exact same problem. Even after the assembly voted down his decree for martial law and then impeached him, Mr. Yoon vowed to fight to the end. He holed up in his hilly residence in central Seoul behind bodyguards, rolls of razor wire, and barricades of buses. Mr. Yoon repeatedly ignored summons from investigators to face questioning for insurrection charges. He no doubt would have had the same problem here. When they visited his presidential compound on January 3rd to serve a court warrant to detain him, he refused to surrender, and his 200 presidential security officials formed human barricades to repel 100 investigators and police officers. So there you have it. That's the answer. If 100 police show up to arrest the president and the president has 200 presidential security officials, what happens? Presidential security officials win. But what happens later when on Wednesday, that's today for us and yesterday for them, even though it's actually today, you understand with the timeline, the international date line, the investigators mobilized more than 200. In fact, 1,000 police officers, including units specializing in targeting drug and organized crime gangs, to storm the compound again in overwhelming numbers. Is it because they think that the president is involved in a drug or organized crime gang? No. But the tactics are similar. Look, we need people who are trained in getting through barricades, personal security forces, razor wire, etc., to grab somebody who doesn't want to go and who has some resources to keep him from having to go. Anyway, some carried aluminum ladders to clamber over barricades of buses that blocked the road leading to Mr. Yoon's residence. Now, how are there gates and fences too? Because, I mean, if there's a bus on the road to the residence, go around the bus. I assume that the sides are blocked with something else. So, okay, ladders to climb over the buses for some reason as opposed to the wall part of things. I don't know. I'd like to see the video of this. They would be, let's see. His bodyguards put up no resistance, interestingly enough, after warnings from the investigators that if they did, they would be arrested on charges of obstructing justice. So that seemed to have worked on them. At the gate of his residence, investigators haggled for 2 hours with supporters of Mr. Yoon. The president's lawyers suggested that if the investigators withdrew, Mr. Yoon would visit their headquarters with his presidential security details to submit himself to questioning. But the investigators would have none of it. At 10:33 a.m., they served the warrant. Mr. Yoon did gain some concessions. He was not handcuffed when he was taken to the investigators' headquarters south of Seoul in a motorcade through busy morning traffic. He was escorted straight to a third-floor room where he faced a marathon interrogation. The investigators have said that they had 200 pages of questions to ask. But a governing party lawmaker who met Mr. Yoon before his detention indicated that the president would insist on his right to remain silent. So it doesn't matter how many pages in that sense. In a video message released shortly after he was taken away, Mr. Yoon said he agreed to submit to questioning in order to prevent a bloody clash between his bodyguards and the police, but he called the investigation and the warrant to detain him illegal. To many analysts, however, his fate appears to have been set. The investigators have 48 hours to interrogate him, but can then seek a separate court warrant to formally arrest him. Since courts have already agreed to the arrests of Mr. Yoon's associates in his imposition of martial law, they are likely to agree to his arrest as well. Analysts said, if he is arrested, the investigators and prosecutors must indict him within 20 days. Separately, this week, the country's constitutional court began deliberating whether the Assembly's vote on December 14th to impeach Mr. Yoon was legitimate and if he should be formally removed from office. Oh, I guess that hasn't happened? That's amazing. I thought that that was the case and that somebody else is the acting president. But I guess the constitutional court deliberating whether the vote was legitimate. Or I guess they have voted to remove him from office, but someone is suing over the question of was that a legitimate move for them to make. So should we honor their declaration that they have met and formally impeached him and removed him from office? They're acting as though they have, and they've put somebody else in as acting president. But now the question is, does the Constitutional Court recognize that? I guess. Since people will take it for granted that courts will likely allow his arrest and uphold his impeachment, the national attention will now quickly migrate to who should become the next president, said Park Sung-min, the head of MIN Consulting, a Seoul-based political advisory company. An election, which must take place within 2 months of a court ruling if it removes Mr. Yoon, could add to a deepening political tribalism in South Korea that has fueled street protests both for and against Mr. Yoon. I guess so, but it could add to political tribalism, but how else do you propose to solve the question of who should be president? An election, it may add to divisions, but it also will give you a president. Anyway, when conservative activists have rallied in recent weeks, they vilified Lee Jae-myung, the main opposition leader and presidential hopeful, as a dangerous left-wing radical. That too, very similar sounding, isn't it? Mr. Lee has himself been fighting legal charges under Mr. Yoon that he says are politically motivated. Interesting too, and that has a weird parallel here as well. Yoon, of course, says the charges against him are politically motivated, just as Donald Trump has said about charges against him. But pretty soon, it'll be real interesting watching the world get tired of hearing Donald Trump complain that all the charges against him are politically motivated. But I think Donald Trump, to the extent that he has any plans and looks forward on anything, maybe his advisors are thinking. Everybody is rolling their eyes at that. We know that. But that'll actually work to our advantage when we weaponize the Justice Department and bring charges against our own political opposition. And the political opposition will say, these charges are ridiculous. I've never done anything like this. This is an obvious political attack, and the charges against me are political in nature. And everybody will say, remember when you rolled your eyes at that when the other guy? Yeah. So everybody's used to rolling their eyes at that, right? Roll your eyes on cue when Democrats say this, even though it may very well be true when it happens. So what else have we got? Conspiracy theories, of course, finally getting a mention here, quickly spreading through YouTube and other social media platforms, have only helped deepen the political division. A man who subscribed to such theories, by the way, remember, here's another little factoid, I guess. Did I forget about this? I think so. Even though I believe we've read this before. Lee Jae-myung, the main opposition leader, right, being cast by right-wing politicians and right-wing YouTubers as a dangerous left-wing radical. Apparently, one of the things that right-wing wacko YouTube in Korea has moved wacko right-wingers to do is stab Mr. Lee in the neck with a knife last January. Holy moly. I'm pretty sure we heard about this and it's not top of mind for some reason for us because we're not South Korean. In a lengthy statement posted in his Facebook account on Wednesday, Mr. Yoon again peddled a conspiracy theory popular among his followers, saying that his declaration of martial law was driven in part by widespread voting fraud in South Korea. I don't see how the parallels could escape anybody at this point, and yet we pay no attention to this. Yoon's detention is the first step toward restoring the constitutional order, democracy, and the rule of law, said Park Chan-dae, the floor leader of the main opposition Democratic Party. It was belated, but it is also confirmed that our nation's law enforcement and justice are still alive. But Mr. Yoon's People Power Party refused to accept Mr. Yoon's impeachment and his detention. It pushed out a party leader who supported Mr. Yoon's impeachment, that too parallel, and has demanded that a lawmaker who backed the impeachment leave the party. The reason they insisted on detaining the president was that they wanted to humiliate him. Kwon Young-se, an interim leader of the People Power Party, said on Wednesday they wanted to elevate their status by detaining a sitting president. The cutthroat rivalry among parties leaves little room for debate and compromise as the nation struggles to overcome its worst political crisis in decades. The approval ratings of Mr. Yoon's party, which took a nosedive in the wake of his martial law declaration, began climbing back up the past week as polarized politics kicked back in again. So I guess it's just a huge cautionary tale for us. Not that we're really going to pay attention to it because it happened outside this country. But honestly, if it happened right here in front of us, we would probably be willing to forget about it in a couple of weeks. Anyway, we had an insurrection right here in this country and then went ahead and reelected the guy who orchestrated the insurrection. So, that's the way it goes. All right. Other items of interest still hanging out in pocket here that I guess we should try to get through. One, I will bring you up to date on something we'll have to deal with fairly shortly when Trump's inaugurated and they get down to business in Congress. They're supposed to have gotten down to business in Congress already, but here's what they're doing with their time, I guess. Apparently, The Hill reports to us in the person of Alexander Bolton that Trump is frustrated already with GOP lawmakers about what? Well, over debt limit quandary. This returns to the scene almost as soon as he reports back to the White House. President-elect Trump wants congressional Republicans to figure out a way to avoid a default on the national debt. That would be nice. After venting his frustration with the Senate GOP over its failure to raise the debt limit as part of a government funding package last month. Remember, he just wanted the still Democratic Senate to go along with doing him a huge favor, and not bringing down the debt or raising the debt ceiling, but just waiving the limit. We've reached the limit, we've surpassed the limit, but can you just ignore it by congressional declaration? Sure. Go ahead and do it. Well, by law, congressional declaration means something these days. Used to, anyway. So what's going on here? Trump told Senate Majority Leader John Thune at a recent meeting that it's now up to him to find a way around the debt limit impasse, according to a Republican source familiar with the conversation. Remember, Republican members of Congress, all members of Congress really dislike this, but Republican members in Congress dislike it a lot because they've railed against it. Their rhetoric about the national debt and deficit and budget deficits, etc., is a mainstay of political discourse over the last, 50, 60 years. And it's supposed to be bedrock Republican principle that they won't vote to increase or waive the debt limit. It has instead fallen almost entirely, I think. Republicans have done it once for Donald Trump before, and then they just said, everybody look the other way, and people did. But before that, it's basically been the case, for about half of the, if not more, of the time that Republicans have made the national debt an issue for them. Democrats have been in control of Congress, and because they don't want to default, they don't want to ruin the economy, they've said, well, we're going to raise the debt ceiling, even for Republican presidents. We're just going to do it. Republicans then benefited from it, but then turned around and would attack Democrats for it politically. And it became a part of Republican canon that you don't raise the debt ceiling until you have to. And then in which case, if you do, don't raise the debt ceiling, just waive the debt limit and say, never mind. So they very, very rarely, if ever, have to actually take any responsibility for dealing with the debt ceiling. And now it's coming back, and now there's no way around it. And they either have to just continue waiving the thing or raise it, and they're not sure what to do. But they've, the members of Congress, Republicans, have pledged never to do that. And now they're being forced to do that by the guy who will primary them if they don't, just like they have to swallow Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, even though everybody can see the huge, huge, huge problems with that. They have to do it anyway, or else they'll be primaried. And here, too, you got to go against Republican catechism, something you've personally pledged along with everybody else never to do. Now you got it. Now I say you have to do it. And you have to say it was your idea, and I'll say I didn't want them to do it, but they did it anyway. And you just have to sit there and take it. That's what's going up. So what's going on? He's frustrated because he's finding that there are Republicans who say, I don't know if I want to do that. The debt limit came up, Thune said. He's very unhappy that that's hanging out there. And this is somebody else who's saying this, a source familiar with the conversation. Okay, the debt limit came up. Very unhappy that it's hanging out there, and he made it Thune's problem. He said, John, I don't know how you're going to solve this problem, but you're going to figure out some way. A GOP senator who attended the meeting said, by the way, what a genius president. Mr. Genius Businessman is going to fix all the financial problems. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you should do it. You're going to figure out some way. Republicans say Trump's unhappy that Congress failed to raise the debt limit before he takes office on January 20th and wants congressional leaders to take care of the looming problem, largely washing his own hands of the matter, at least for now. He's washing for himself and for Hegseth now. Yes, we have to figure out, because we're in the majority, Senator John Cornyn said, of Congress's inability to take care of the debt limit before Trump's inauguration. He's not happy. I'm not happy. But that's where we are, Cornyn said. He should guest write Chris Cillizza's column for him. It's becoming clear that a debt limit increase won't be a part of a budget reconciliation package that's being plotted out to move much of Trump's legislative agenda, which is interesting as a subject all in its own right. Also interesting that they've chosen not to put the debt ceiling change in the reconciliation package, given that it is one of the, restricted number of topics that are addressable under reconciliation. This one is explicitly recognized, but they're still not using it that way. But this too, something we got to go back and read a little bit about. It's been in the news, but there's so many other things we've been focusing on that at the outset of the new Congress, Republicans in the House, etc., have said, yeah, well, we're going to use reconciliation to enact as much of Trump's agenda as we can, because reconciliation bills not subject to the filibuster in the Senate. We all know the rules about that. We know why it's not subject to the filibuster. It is statutorily time-limited debate, and if there's a statutory amount of time prescribed for debate, then you can't extend that time except by vote-a-rama, which you and I know about, but most people relearn this whole thing every time there's a reconciliation bill or a budget package coming through. And we also know, well, sure, it's not subject to the filibuster, but there are rules the parliamentarian usually enforces to limit the scope of a reconciliation bill. There are certain topics that are supposedly off limits. There are certain types of legislative work typically off limits. The reconciliation process was created by the 1974 Budget Act and was given protection from the filibuster so long as the material in the bill didn't simply use the reconciliation as a workaround. You're not supposed to legislate policy and create new policies and fund new policies under a reconciliation bill. The reconciliation bill is supposed to be one, chiefly fiscal, and two, the only things that are allowed, used to be allowed in a reconciliation bill, were things that made direct impact on the budget bottom line, and originally things that made a positive impact, that is, would achieve savings and not add to the federal budget deficit and therefore then to the national debt. But they've been figuring out ways around that for quite a while. There are always waivers that you can do, but you need 60 votes to do them. But instead, it sounds like Trump's big plan is, well, why don't we just put everything we want to do, even the whole thing for the next 2 years, the whole policy agenda, all of Project 2025 or whatever we need to do, into this one big, beautiful bill, as he's saying. It's just so disgusting to hear him use this idiotic terminology. One big, beautiful bill. Now, interestingly, Congress came together at the beginning of the new Congress and said, we've got plans for reconciliation. We're going to do this. We're going to do all the things Trump wants, and we're going to protect it from the filibuster with reconciliation. We're going to, in fact, we're going to do 2 reconciliation bills. That's how much we love this process now. They used to say it was unconstitutional when Democrats did it. Now they love it, and we're going to do it twice. But then Trump, for some strange reason, said, I don't know, I want you to do it one time. One big, beautiful bill. And I don't think that he knows of any strategic reason not to do it twice. And in fact, probably they'll do it once, and then he'll remember that there's something else that he wants, and he'll demand a second one. But for now, they're saying that, okay, we're going to do Trump's one big, beautiful bill. And it's our job to figure out not only how to raise the debt limit in it, and I mean, it's straightforward. You just do it. But for some reason, they don't want to in that bill. And then they got to find ways to shoehorn in all the policy stuff that would ordinarily be disallowed. Democrats were told for, I don't know, a solid decade or more by the parliamentarian, no, I won't allow this. And, of course, everybody knew that you could get rid of the parliamentarian. But Democrats don't do that stuff. And you'll now see Republicans, if not getting rid of the parliamentarian, then overtly threatening to do so. And suddenly, all the stuff that Democrats could never get into a reconciliation bill will be in this one, and it will be A-OK. Trump wants that package to be moved in one bill that would include border and energy provisions, why, and an extension of the 2017 tax cuts that he signed into law, which at least is fiscal in nature, but it does not have a positive impact on the national debt or federal deficit, including a debt hike in that bill would be tough, since conservatives say hiking the nation's debt limit must be coupled with up to $2 trillion in spending cuts. Of course, that was something that they used to say when Democrats had a hand in policymaking. Now that it's all Republican, they may suddenly change their minds. Trump urged House Republicans last month to vote for a stopgap funding measure bundled with disaster relief and economic aid to farms that also included, at his insistence, a proposal to extend the debt limit past the 2026 midterm election. And he vented his fury when conservatives in both chambers, including Texas Representative Chip Roy and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, balked at voting for any debt limit legislation that did not include substantial spending cuts to offset the impact on the federal debt. Chip Roy is just another ambitious guy with no talent. He should be vice president. Trump fumed on Truth Social. I hope some talented challengers are getting ready in the great state of Texas to go after Chip in the primary. He won't have a chance. We'll see. Trump grumbled that increasing the debt ceiling is not great and that we'd rather do it on Biden's watch. This now leaves Thune and Speaker Mike Johnson in a tough position of having to figure out a way to raise the debt limit sometime later this year when Republicans will be in control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. GOP senators say Thune and Johnson at this point have two viable options. And I'll read them to you, even though what you should be thinking about. What about non-viable options? Can they make them viable? Can we just declare them viable? Can we just declare them done? Well, the two viable options, back in the days when laws applied, they can either attempt to negotiate a debt limit increase with Democrats, which would likely entail agreeing to more spending, or they can simply bring a standalone debt limit increase to the floor without concessions and dare Democrats to vote against it. Right? They'd be in the opposite position as last time. Sure, Democrats could oppose it, but that would crash the economy. Well, that's true. And they'll point out, Democrats said that about Republicans last time, and it's just as true this time, only now about Democrats. They can be an opposition party, but if the economy crashes, it'll be their fault. And it'll be right to an extent. And Democrats, though, will say, oh, my God, well, I'm actually worried about that. We should do something about that. We need to make sure that our votes change. And, you know, that's what Republicans did, too. But there were plenty of Republicans who still voted no. And by the way, it's not like they actually faced any political blowback from doing it either. But we'll see how Democrats opt to deal with this. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer got Trump and Republican leaders to agree to two major spending increases in 2018 and 19 in exchange for Democratic votes on proposals to raise the debt limit. Trump agreed in February 2018 to raise defense and non-defense spending by $300 billion in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling. He then agreed to another $320 billion spending increase in July of 2019 to extend the debt limit again past the 2020 presidential election. He loves doing it that way. Senate Republicans say it looks increasingly unlikely that Thune and Johnson will attempt to include debt limit legislation in any package used to move Trump's agenda. That's because a reconciliation bill, which can pass with a simple majority through the Senate, all bills can pass with a simple majority through the Senate, you know that, and thereby avoid a Democratic filibuster, that's the real issue, isn't expected to get any Democratic votes in the Senate or House. But Democratic votes might be needed to move the debt ceiling, since getting nearly the entire House GOP conference to agree on raising the debt limit seems unlikely at this point. Remember, they can only lose, at the moment, one vote. And you just say Thomas Massie and you're in trouble. Say Chip Roy and you're in trouble. It's a really heavy lift for Johnson, said former Senator Judd Gregg, haven't heard that name in a while, who chaired the Senate Budget Committee back in the day. He warned that Democrats would likely demand a steep price for voting for any bipartisan debt limit bill, and that any concessions Johnson and Thune make to get Democratic support would inevitably push more Republicans to vote against it. That's going to lose even more Republicans, he said. It's really a heads you lose, tails you lose situation. It's supposed to be heads I win, tails you lose, but okay. Thanks for coming by, Judd. There's no easy path for getting this done, given the numbers. Trump and Senate Republicans didn't talk seriously about including language to raise the debt limit in the budget reconciliation package, for some strange reason, when they met on Wednesday at the Capitol to map out strategy. GOP senators say there's little confidence that Johnson would be able to unify enough of his conference to raise the debt limit without Democratic help, given that he can only afford to lose one or two Republican votes because of his extremely narrow majority. Timing is another problem. Congress will need to raise the debt limit by midsummer, but there's no guarantee Republicans will be able to sort out their disagreements on tax policy and spending cuts over the next 6 months. And I mean, that's a long time. Trump has insisted on Republicans passing, for no real reason, one big, beautiful bill to secure the border, reform oil and gas drilling restrictions, cut taxes, and cut spending, instead of breaking up his agenda into two reconciliation packages. Another major drawback to adding the debt limit increase to the budget reconciliation package is that doing so would require lawmakers to explicitly state how much they would like to raise the borrowing cap by, a number that would be well over $1 trillion, instead of just setting a future date for the expiration of borrowing authority. I guess if you do it via reconciliation, that's the requirement. Conservatives say they're willing to raise the debt limit in exchange for up to $2 trillion in mandatory spending cuts or a plan to balance the federal budget in the next few years. But such drastic cuts in spending, even if they exempt Social Security, Medicare, and defense, will have a tough time winning the support of Republican centrists. Ooh, there are some, I guess. Senator Rick Scott has argued to colleagues that the best way to deal with the debt limit is to adopt a plan to balance the budget. Sure, why not? Let's just go get a plan for that. Scott and other conservatives, including Ron Johnson and Mike Lee, have reviewed data showing that if Congress can return the federal government's annual outlays to what they were in 1998, adjusted for inflation, that'll take care of everything, I'm sure. Well, just go back to 1998.
From
Why not 1958?
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, that's where we'll leave it for today, since we're out of time, and it's time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's on tap? This is a good one. Ready? Jasmine Crockett clapped back at Nancy Mace after Mace physically threatened her during a committee hearing. Now Nancy Mace, I understand, challenging Crockett to a fight. We'll see if that happens.